The wind dragged the night across the plains like an old, tattered coat. Dust swirled through the frigid air, whispering around the broken fences and boarded up homes of the frontier town. In the faint light of the dying lanterns, a figure moved. Stagger, sway her shadow stretching across the snow-dusted earth like something forgotten by the world itself. Her braids, once neatly woven, now clung to her shoulders, dark with blood, and her dress, once the color of clay and summer rivers, hung in tatters against her knees. She pressed one hand against her side, desperate to keep herself from falling apart, the other bracing against the nearest door. The wood was warm from the fire inside. She could smell bread baking, hear the soft laughter of voices. For a fleeting moment she thought maybe this could be it. But when she knocked, the laughter ceased. Footsteps approached, hesitated, then retreated. She tried again, softer now, a whisper against the storm. A curtain shifted, and a woman's pale face appeared, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then, without a word, the latch fell into place, sharp and final. She turned away, her breath a harsh cloud in the cold. The sound of the lock echoed through her bones. She told herself to keep moving, to find another house, another chance. But the next porch was worse. A man stood there, thick coat drawn tight, rifle angled downward. He didn't speak a word, simply shook his head. She longed to tell him she was no threat, that she had once lived nearby, that her people had shared salt and stories by this same stretch of river. But the words wouldn't come. Her tongue felt as heavy as stone. The man's shadow swallowed hers as he stepped closer, and before the barrel lifted, she turned and fled. Her feet carried her through the howling storm, past the blackened skeleton of the old church. Its bell hung motionless, frozen like the memory of a prayer long forgotten. She leaned against its weathered steps, struggling to breathe, but the air tore at her lungs. She whispered her mother's name, then her father's, and then she stopped. There was no one left to answer. In the doorway of the saloon, an old drunk watched her. His eyes were dull, lost in some private sorrow. He muttered something incomprehensible and spat into the snow. But his hound, a thin, trembling thing, followed her, padding softly behind, its presence quiet. It didn't bark, didn't beg for attention. It simply trailed her, keeping its distance, as if even animals knew when a soul had been cast out by its own kind. The night deepened, swallowing the last slivers of light. Her shawl stiffened with frost. Each gust of wind tugged at her, threatening to topple her, urging her closer to the thought of lying down and letting the sky close over her. The town had fallen behind, its lights dimming against the rolling hills. Ahead stretched the open prairie, vast and unyielding, white and merciless. She had walked these plains as a child, running barefoot through the tall grass that shimmered gold under the sun. Now she was a stranger to it all. She remembered her mother's voice teaching her the names of the winds. Now the same land had turned against her. The fences cut across the earth like scars. The trails were gone. Every door she had known was gone, too. Her steps faltered. She sank to her knees, palms pressed to the frozen ground. The hound whined softly, circling her once before sitting in the snow. She wanted to weep, but tears froze before they could fall. She stared into the endless dark, unthought. So this is how the world ends, not with a wound, but with a door that never opens. Then faint and far, she saw smoke, a single thread rising from beyond a cluster of black pines. It might have been a dream, but she followed it anyway. One more step, then another. The snow deepened to her calves. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The dog trotted ahead, barking yins before vanishing into the trees, through the pines. The world changed. There, on the edge of a ridge, stood Asmal cabin. Its roof bowed under snow, but light flickered from its window. Not gold like the town's lamps, but softer, steadier. A man sat inside, hunched over fire. She reached the porch, finger-snum vision swimming. She tried talk-knock, but her hand fell against Theodore like a dying bird's wing. Inside, the man looked up. His face was lined by Salochu, his eyes dark with a kind of silence that years carve into men who stop expecting company. The dog barked a dagon, sharp and urgent. He rose, crossed the floor, and opened the door. The wind rushed in, carrying the scent of blood and smoke. For a moment, Hess stood still, looking down at her. The tangled braids, the torn shawl, the trembling hands. Her lips moved, but no sound came. He had every reason to closet that door. Trouble followed strangers, trouble followed kindness. He knew that better than anyone. And yet, as the wind lifted her hair, and he saw the barest flicker of life in her eyes, something wordless in him broke open. He bent, slid his arms beneath her, and carried her inside. The warmth hit her like a dream. Firelight moved across the wall sofa, a table worn smooth by years of meals taken alone. He laid her down nerf hearth, covered her with a quilt, and disappeared. Into the next room. She heard water splash into a basin, the clink of tin, the soft scrape of boots returning. When she opened her eyes again, he was kneeling beside her, washing the blood from her hands. No questions, no judgment, only the steady rhythm of cloth against skin. For the first time in weeks, she let her body stop fighting. The smell of stew drifted through the air. He ladled a portion in tow, a tin bowl, set it before her. She ate slowly, each bite pulling her further back from the edge. The fire cracked outside. The storm began to fade. He said nothing more, just moved to the hearth and laid another quilt near. Her feet. She wanted to thank him, but when she tried, her throat's closet with tears. He didn't need words. The quiet between them was enough. Outside, the prairie groaned under the weight of snow. Inside, a single act of mercy wrote the night. And as she drew sleep, her last thought was a whisper to the wind that maybe, just maybe, the world still held one door that would open. The morning, a revered pole and trembling, light crawling gay crossed the floorboards like summer thingrid to disturb the quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the prairie wrapped in white. Inside the cabin, the air war soft with wood smoke and the low hiss of a dying fire. She lay awake beneath the quilt he'd given her, watching how their flame's reflection moved in the tin coupon. The table. How even the smallest part could keep the dark from taking of her. The man was already up, his boots whispering across the planks. He poured water into a kettle, his movements deliberate, unhurried. The kind of silence that speaks instead of words. When he caught her eyes open, he didn't startle or rush to speak. He simply nodded once, as if to say, "You're Sophono," and turned back to the stove. Her throat was dry, her body still aching, but for the first time in many days, she felt hunger, a small, shy thing. He set a plate beside her without a word, bread and beans still steaming. When her fingers shook, reaching for it, he looked away, giving her privacy. Mercy, she realized, didn't need to speak to Boindestod. She studied him while Hugh worked tall, shoulders broad from Yasef, carrying solitude, hair falling loose, over a tired face that hadn't smiled in a long while. He moved like a man, Useto, doing everything alone. She wondered what grief had carved him into such stillness. The day grew brighter, and with light came unease. Gratitude had battled shame within her. She didn't belong here. This cabin was warm, safe, too. Kind of place for someone marked by the world as untouchable. She rose, wobbling on sore feet, and whispered that she should go. He turned slowly, eyes unreadable. Then, with quiet certainty, he said, "You'll die out there." His tone carried no command, only fact, as if the wind itself had spoken through him. She looked toward the door, the sunlight sharp against the frost, and knew he was right. Outside waited the same doors that never opened, the same silence that kills. Inside a different silence waited, not empty, Butherman. She sat back down. Time began to flow differently. Days folded into a Nineveh like soft cloth. She helped where she could, swept the floor, tended fire, mended a torn sleeve. He never scared, never told her to stop. Sometimes he shared supper. By the hearth, sometimes he sat outside while she hummed low songs to the dusk. Neither tried to name what was forming between them. Something too fragile to call friendship, too steady to be pity. One afternoon she found him carving a small figure from a piece of pine. He worked carefully as though shaping something Zekard. She watched from the doorway, and when he looked up, he handed it to her, a feather. Delicate and imperfect. He only said, "Thought you might need a little piece of the wind." Her breath caught. She hadn't held anything matter for her in years. That night, while thesters blinked cold above the prairie, she dreamed of her mother, laughing beside a river that no longer ran free. She woke with tears she didn't remember, the feather resting against her heart. As winter thinned, Dunga came. One evening, horses approached. 3 riders, faces hard, voices louder than decency. They dismounted with the sharpness of men who thought everything beneath them. The leader asked if Therentia had seen a runaway savage woman. Her blood froze. She stood behind Thrall, clutching the quilt-like armor. Therentia's voice was calm, heavy with truth. "Ain't seen anyone pass here in weeks." The men's eyes wandered, catching scent of stew, the warmth of fire. One tilted his head, suspicious. "You live alone, then?" He met the man's stare, unflinching. "Always have." The lay hung between them, so steady it sounded like fact. His hand rested near his shoulder, but he didn't reach for it. Hadn't need to. The silence of Hiskeridge spoke for him. The riders left muttering. Their hoof-beat hats faded in teeth distance, leaving only the heartbeat off the fire. She stepped out from the shadows, shaking. Her knees gave way, and she dropped beside the table, gasping like someone who'd surfaced too quickly from deep water. He knelt beside her, one hand hovering near her arm. Hadn't speak, didn't ask why they hunted her or what she'd done to deserve it. He simply took her trembling hand in his raw palm, steady as the earth itself, and held it there until her breath slowed. That touch, quiet, unassuming, became a vow stronger than any promise. The next morning, The world felt different. The snow was melting. A stream of light poured through the window, gilding the dust in the air. She stood at the threshold, looking out over the land. For the first time, she didn't see exile. She saw beginning. He came toast-end beside her, holding something in his hand. It was another carving, a bird, wings spread, rough but alive. For your journey, if you still want Tolavi, he said softly, or for your shelf if you decide to stay. She looked up at him, the firelight catching in his eyes. And if I go, she asked, hair shrugged, lips curving with the faintest hint of warmth. Then the door stays open. Something inside her, the part long frozen by cruelty, began to thaw. She reached out and took the carving, fingers brushing his. The contact burned like truth. The hound barked outside, chasing the last of the snow malt. Smoke rose steady from the chimney. Behind them, the fire crackled, alive, patient, certain. And in that fragile moment between winter and spring, between fear and faith, she realized the world had intended after all. It had only been waiting for one door to open, one Ferretto stay lit long enough for her to find her way.